All right. Welcome back, beautiful humans, to another episode of Naked Sunday. I'm your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have the wonderful, the awesome, the stupendous and fantastic, and maybe I said fantastic twice, but I'm okay with that anyway. Amanda Catarzi. Make sure I'm saying the last name correct. Yes, could yes. I love saying names correctly. Amanda, welcome to the show, honey.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you because you're just so freaking fun to talk to.
The feeling is mutual. And with that being said, I like to start off my episodes with why I appreciate the other person as my guest, because I think we live in a world that we need to practice more telling people why we love them and share that with them. I think that might be a good step in the direction of world peace. I don't know, maybe that's just me. So to that effect, and we were literally just talking about this beforehand, you're like, oh my God, the fact that you were talking about how you struggled to receive a compliment, that resonates very deeply with me. I struggled with that for a long, long time. And I think there is some grace within learning how to do that. But it's also like this way of being able to allow somebody else to feel good in the same moment for accepting that gift. And I struggled with that. That's just one layer of all of this. We've had one conversation before this. You just like emanate this authenticity. You're very transparent. You're very authentic and real and warm and loving and kind. And even before we talked about this, like, nothing's off limits. I'll go there. I'm going to let you know this might be an emotional thing. That might not be. For you to, I just really value your self-awareness around that and your honesty and your willingness to just sit in some uncomfortable spaces. And knowing a little bit of what you've shared so far, I just admire the journey you've been on. And I think a lot of people are going to find some value in that. So for all those many reasons, thank you for being my guest today and just being the person you are.
You're welcome.
That was a really good job. You've already practiced and you've already improved.
It was so difficult. I'm dying inside right now. I'm so uncomfortable just taking that, which is ironic because my love language is words of affirmation. But it's when someone gives me some sort of compliment, I almost, my immediate knee-jerk reaction is to sabotage or talk them out of how great I am. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Look at that. Just so good. You're so good. I love it. I know we had discussed this and I want to get I'll come back to where my train of thought was going beforehand in a second, but you were very eloquently explaining why you have this difficulty with accepting compliments. And you just brought up love languages. I kind of want to touch on both of those just for the audience, because especially any entrepreneurs who are listening right now, I'm starting to find a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, so I'm lumping myself in, struggle with receiving kind words, receiving the words of affirmation. Share your little story about that you were just alluding to beforehand.
I was raised ultra conservative religious cult, in an ultra conservative religious cult, and we were taught that it was sinful to take any sort of credit for what God has created. So any form of compliments, which it was not, they already said you can't really compliment people on their physical appearance. That was like a hard no. But if they complimented like you just did, like, oh, she's fantastic, or she's a great storyteller, or you bring so much joy, then we would say you have to deflect the praise to God. So we are here as mirrors deflecting the praise to Jesus, which I don't think he really gives a fuck. Like, he's good, like he's God, right? So he's not sitting around like some needy ex-girlfriend needing constant affirmation from us. Like, anyways, so we were taught that. So that innate reaction is to go, oh, well, thank you. Well, God gave me the ability, or, I went to therapy, or I had great parenting, or whatever, just deflecting that praise off of me. I think with entrepreneurs, if we agree that we're great, then we hold ourselves to a level of greatness that we might not yet be comfortable with executing at. It's kind of like us saying, like, yeah, I am great, so now everything we do has to be great or something. Maybe that's what's the hidden lie or narrative underneath that.
I have never considered that.
I just thought of that. I'm going freestyle here.
No, that's the beauty of something like this format, where you could just be like, oh shit, like I just learned something just from you dropping that consideration into my mind. Because
It's
the
kind of like
word,
that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay. To me, like that term great or fantastic, it
Mhm.
is broad. It is broad. And if it's like so broad, does that mean I have to be that way in everything? Or is it just in the ways that like I'm going to meet my own expectations and the things that I want to be great at, the things that I care about? I'm going to hold myself to those standards. What does it mean to be that? That was a really,
Does that mean I have to be great all the time to keep your good reputation of me or your good thoughts of me? Because we're already so performance driven. We already feel like we have to prove something because we're stepping out of the norm to be an entrepreneur, that now I have to be great too on top of that.
I have to
It's
be perfect all the
exhausting.
time. Oh my God, never fail. Oh my God.
I
Oh my
am not great all the time.
God.
I'm just gonna straight up tell you, I suck 70% of the time.
Which allows us, which I think so many people are caught. Everybody talks about the social media flexing thing. It's like we only show our great things and our not our failures and all the other stuff. And it's like, and then all of a sudden, like they had the Lambos and all the other shit. They failed a lot before that. Everybody, everybody, and anybody who has ever been risen to any level of, we'll call it material success, would probably attest to the fact that they failed millions of times along the way. And there's this stigma around that. I don't think like what that means to be, whether it's pure or whatever that thing is, like, well, that's a very poignant concept and ideology to have to live up to, as opposed to say like, hey, you're going to learn and you're going to endeavor to become better. You just took my head for a spin. I'm going to be like lost in the clouds later. And then I'm going to have to talk to my wife about it. She's going to roll her eyes because like, oh my God, what existential conversations were you having today?
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry is right. I've digressed for a little bit. So let's bring it back to this, my first poignant question of the day. Amanda, you know yourself better than anybody else. So to that effect, who are you?
Oh my gosh. I am a 32-year-old woman who has insane aspirations to take over the world. So just like you believe, forget the statement you made earlier that love or affirmation or giving compliments and affirming each other is world peace. I think communication is a key component to world peace, and people work. I mean, we wouldn't be in half the trouble we're in if people knew how to communicate effectively. So part of that is teaching people to be their authentic selves and to communicate effectively using copy content, social media, that kind of stuff. But my secret motives are much more deeper, and it's to help people awaken to who they truly are and be that person and give them permission to be that person. And if each of us operated out of an authentic space, like the world would be awesome. It'd be way more fun. People would be way more, because it's hard to hate up close, right? So that understanding of other people and the giving yourself space and time to process different things instead of just react all the time. That's my world domination plan.
All I thought of is Pinky and the Brain. What are we going to do tonight, Brain? Same
One of
thing
my
every
favorite
night,
shows.
Pinky. Trying to take over the world.
Every single day. That's what I'm trying to do.
There was a lot of beauty in that statement. And knowing a little about you, I've come to find the people I admire the most have also, who can share that type of beauty, also have gone through on an interesting journey. So let's take it wherever we need to go. Like, share your journey to how we got to this place where, world domination is kind of an interesting way of putting it, because it certainly arouses certain feelings within all that. But I see here like world illumination to great.
Better way of saying that. especially now.
That's going to be the title of
Oh,
the
shit.
podcast,
God.
World Illumination.
Oh, okay, good. I thought you were going to say world domination. Like this crazy Italian girl. Now we got to worry about the Italians.
Oh, you just take
So
me on a journey, girl. Take me on a journey.
short version is I was born to an Italian circus family. My parents met in the circus. That's how my family got from America to Florida, or Italy to Florida, was through the Ringling Brothers Circus. So that's my lineage. And when they got together, my parents got together, they decided they wanted a completely different lifestyle for me and my brother. So they joined a cult. They did not know it was a cult at the time. Obviously, you don't really ever really know, yeah, I'm going to join a cult. But it was, they gave them a blueprint on how to raise children that had character and godly children. And that was something they never had. So they were doing their very best to give us an incredible life. And they just got into a cult on accident.
Yeah.
So being raised in the cult and then being taught certain things about relationships and my role as a woman, very conservative ideas, very toxic ideas about being a woman, and my role in the world was basically to make babies and to clean the kitchen and have a bright countenance, which didn't work very well for me because I was a very rebellious little Italian sassy girl. So yeah, fast forward, I'm in my 20s. I'm graduated from high school. I've been going to community college for a little bit, and I decided to do the most rebellious thing I could do, which is go to California, which is modern day Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
The heathens.
All my Bible people. And my parents, it was horrible for my parents. And I went to the most eccentric Christian school I could possibly find, which is called Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. It's like Harry Potter school for Christians. So Pentecostal, charismatic, super fun time. It was a very positive time period, actually, because it was my first time figuring out who the hell I was, if I liked peanut butter or not, just finding out who I was, because I wasn't allowed to ever make those kind of choices or explore any original thought up until that point, other than my private journaling, which I hid underneath my bed. So yeah, and then after 3 years of school there, I graduated. I started working for their media company and running their content section of their media company. And I started doing MMA because I was bored. I had no friends. So there was a gym right down the road. Started going there, training there. And one of my coaches took a special interest in me, and we got involved in what I thought was a relationship. And it turned out he was actually a trafficker. And he leveraged my naivety and used it against me and ended up sex and labor trafficking me. So that's, I'm going to breathe for a second because I just talked a bunch.
Well, on that one, I'll pause.
Yeah.
Breathe. Wow. Now, as we're taking this breath to like, hey, let's absorb the fact that we just brought up sex trafficking. You had alluded to the fact before, like you were on another podcast and you framed, well, the host had framed like, hey, by the way, we're gonna make light, not so much make light. It's gonna sound probably a little light. And there's gonna be some joking in here. We were talking about like how comedy can bring a lot of like peace and acceptance to a very painful situation. And obviously this is your story, so you get to say it however you want. This is not my place to tell you how to do it, but
yeah,
bringing in more appreciation for how you've been handling things. Again, I knew a little bit about this stuff already from our previous conversation. Just the fact that you do bring that levity to it, I feel like it can cut. Like sometimes people need to learn how to cut through the tension. It's like cutting through hard butter. You need like the hot knife to cut through that so that you can start to break apart this very painful, emotionally wound up thing so that you can then find a way to move on with your life. So that was just my little aside that people are listening here. Like, that's what I hear when you bring levity to it. I think that anybody who maybe is going through a difficult time in their life, finding a way to softly poke fun and bring light and levity to that darkness lets it air itself out. So,
and obviously there's a healthy version of that and there's a dysfunctional version of that. I will say that I've had 10 years of intensive therapy. So most of this is healthy. There might be a drop or two of, bitterness still looming at the edges. But if conversations are hard to have, then we don't normally jump to have them. So making a conversation easier and lighter, we get closer to a solution that way, and closer to learning that way. If it's hard to have every single time, then like if the butter is super hard, we're not going to use it because it's going to tear up our toast. Right? We got to let that thing soften a little bit until we can use it and enjoy it. And so using this information for good is the whole reason why I'm here. I like the butter analogy.
That came out of the top of my head. So you were just channeling something. I was just channeling butter and toast.
Cold butter sucks.
Cold butter does suck, but some good soft, like grass-fed butter, like what's it, Kerrygold? I think about that one. I'm not sponsored by Kerrygold, but Kerrygold, if you are listening and you want to sponsor the podcast, it might be a little weird. Butter on Naked Sunday, like things can get real weird, but whatever.
Whatever floats your boat. That bulletproof coffee, that'll make you look good naked. You have enough of that. Woo!
I'm a big fan of bulletproof coffee to that effect. I would.
So I was being sex and labor trafficked on a Native American reservation in Northern California. And I wasn't like, oh gosh, I'm being sex trafficked. I know exactly what's happening. I thought I was in an abusive, toxic relationship, and I thought I could save him. And then he also had children. So I wanted it, at some point it shifted from saving him to I need to stay to make sure these kids are okay. So that was the main piece that kept me there. Was we did not use drugs. A lot of sex trafficking victims, they use drugs to keep their victims kind of hooked or attached. I did not. Fortunately and unfortunately, no drugs were involved, which unfortunately meant that I was conscious and sober for everything. And there was no real escape other than the disassociation that I created in order to escape the moment. So that's something I'm still working through. I'm really, I can turn emotions on and off like a light switch. And learning to stay engaged in the present is really scary for me still. So that's something that I constantly have to think about, even being engaged in good things, because I was taught that after a good thing comes a bad thing. There's always a roll, highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. And so it's even difficult for me to enjoy something good because I've been taught that something bad is soon to follow. So yeah.
That resonates with me as well. The it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. That kind of expectation. And I think it's also in the framing of it. This good thing happened, that means a bad thing's going to happen. And I think, especially as you talk about this rigid dogmas that come with a cult or whatever, high control groups in any way, shape, or form, it's a lot about this puritanical right, wrong, good, bad. Like there's a line in the sand. There is no gray area. And the language and the judgment and the guilt and shame that gets wrapped around that also doesn't leave any breathing room to like cope with the feeling, either high or low. And I had a friend, and I don't want to bring this up just because it seems relevant. He was like, well, what if you if you accept that the other shoe is going to drop, like there is going to be other poor feelings, not necessarily the best moments in time, but like instead, like, okay, great, it's going to happen. So how, instead saying like, so how do you choose to respond next time that happens? And how do we maybe also not look at it as a bad thing? Maybe it's, oh, so your next learning opportunity is here now. Like it's a very different way of looking at bad and good. It's here's a high and here is a lesson. Both
exciting growth opportunity.
Yeah, it's the mindset work of every entrepreneur. Like, I got to fix my mindset. It's true, but also there's a way about going and fix your mindset. Like, not just plug yourself into another cult-like mentality around it. What was the turning point for you amidst the trafficking where you're like, this is not like, like you said, like you didn't understand what it was. You said it was like,
Mhm.
you were aware this is a toxic relationship.
Mhm.
Then you said you shifted, I need to save these other kids in some way,
Mhm.
shape, or form. What was it like? No, like there's a bigger thing, and then it's like, oh, this is sex trafficking. That's what this thing is. Okay, now I need to change it. What was that light bulb moment for you?
I didn't realize it was sex trafficking until I was completely out of it in like 8 months later.
Oh,
Um,
really? I didn't know that.
yeah, like I mean, I had no idea what sex trafficking was. Like you hear about it and you think like some girl in Thailand chained to a bed, like the movie Taken, but that's not it at all. Um, and it happens here in America to hundreds of thousands of women, men, children every single day. Um, so sex trafficking is actually the exchange of something of value for a sexual act. So it could be a picture, a sexual picture. It could be sexual talk. It could be a sexual action, sexual act, actually like having sexual intercourse or hand job, blow job, those kind of things, in exchange for something of value. So it doesn't even have to be money necessarily. It could be food, it can be lodging, it could be safety, it could be clothing. And then with adults, you have to prove fraud, force, or coercion in order to make it sex trafficking. With children, in most states in America, you don't have to prove fraud, force, or coercion because they cannot consent.
Right.
So any sex act for children in exchange for something of value is sex trafficking. Even if the child is engaging willingly, they cannot consent. So that's a huge problem in foster care, because children are already connected themselves to a paycheck. They understand that the people who take care of them get a paycheck. So in order for them to take control and take some of that power back, they traffic themselves to get the money. That's how they can control the situation. So it's a really interesting psychological journey when you're trying to get children to not traffic themselves who are in foster care. But how I got
wasn't
out of
aware of that. I didn't
Oh yeah,
ever
that's a
that
huge issue.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I did not. Sorry, I
Yeah.
cut you off there, but that was just something I was completely unaware of.
Yeah, it's a huge job in foster care. That was my last position, was working with foster care children and getting them out of trafficking situations. And the hardest part is they were willingly engaging. And people just don't care if foster care kids disappear. Which was the most infuriating part of the process. Is I would have a kid disappear. I could track down basically to where they were. I would need police backup to go get these kids, and they were very nonchalant about it. I'm like, so you understand, like every day you put this off, this child is being raped, and you're okay with that. So that was absolutely infuriating to deal with police who didn't care, to deal with judges who did not care, who called children prostitutes. Like, the system is broken. And that's what initially led to me quitting, because I was contributing to a broken system that was harming children and not helping them. And I could not have that blood on my hands. So that's why I quit 2 years ago.
Wow.
So, but how I got out of trafficking was I was driving back from a training session. I was fighting MMA at the time. So I was being labor trafficked through MMA fights by my coach, and he was also sex trafficking me. And
wait. So the MMA fights, he was making money from that's how the labor. Got it. Just wanted you to clarify where that was coming from. Okay.
Yeah. So he would set up the fights. I would win a lot of the times. It was pretty good. And he would take the money from it and reinvest it into my training or fight opportunities. And I just went along with it because I believed it. And he would sell me the dream of, you're going to be a UFC fighter. We're going to get you in. You're going to be one of the first women's strawweight fighters. And I actually had a tryout for the first 115 Ultimate Women's Fighter. But he gave it to somebody else because I pissed him off. So, and she went and she tried out and she didn't make it on. So, because she was bad. I was a lot better. But I was driving home from that training practice and somebody ran a red light and T-boned me in my truck and totaled my truck. There was a police officer behind me, so he saw the whole thing. I was knocked out, and he thought I was dead, but I was not. And when I came to, they had just used the machine to pry my door open. And he goes, "Oh my God, I thought you were dead." That's the first thing he said to me. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Because I'm used to having concussions. I'm used to fighting. I'm used to the crap getting beat out of me and me to say, I'm fine. So I kind of just brushed it all off. I texted my trafficker at that time and said, "Hey, I almost just died in a car accident." And he said, "Is your face fucked up?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Okay, you're still fuckable then." And it was in that moment that I was like, maybe this isn't a good relationship to be in.
Whoa.
Maybe this isn't who I'm supposed to be. Maybe this isn't the person I'm supposed to be with. That's when kind of like the house of cards kind of started tumbling down in my mind. Yeah. And it was the first moment of clarity that I had had in a long time. So yeah, that was the moment. It was like coming out of water. I was like, this isn't the life I want. This isn't, like, enough is enough. And he wouldn't even come pick me up. So I had to call a John, someone who had raped me, to come pick me up and take me to my apartment in the city. And so he was nicer and he did that. And I ate some ice cream. And then I ended up going to the hospital because I couldn't understand how to order a pizza. I was unable to finish sentences, and I had severe brain trauma.
Holy
So
shit.
my fight career was over at that point, which was devastating for me because I had sacrificed so much up to that point in that relationship, in my life to get to that point. And now all of a sudden it's all gone. And now I'm questioning everything surrounding that.
Yeah.
And it's scary when your brain doesn't work, when you're trying to say words that you used to have and they're nowhere to be found, or where you can't figure out how to order a pizza. That's a really scary moment.
Now, I'm going to go on a limb and say this was not was this like a fast? Like, I'm done? Well, obviously, I mean, recovering from a brain injury takes time. That's that's not like, just, people used to make light of concussions. And now, thankfully, that's being like, no, that thing's a pretty important piece of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Take some time. Let's rehabilitate this thing. But not only with you coping with that, like a physiological, like, whoa, that got scrambled, but also now dealing with this, I'm going to call it this infrastructure of like sex trafficking, that the environment that you're surrounded with, these people and all this. How long did it take, and like what was that process like to be out, or was it faster than that? I have no idea.
I was aware that I had a moment of clarity, and I was aware that that wouldn't last very long. So I knew that it would take only a matter of days to be sucked back into that cycle. For whatever reason, call it God, call it intuition, the universe, I just knew that that was the case. And with an unveiling to a degree of the truth and of the reality that I was in, came a overwhelming flood of emotions that I had not dealt with, that I had disassociated with. So that happened. And then the next night, I believe it's kind of scrambled for obvious reasons. But within a day or two, I tried to commit suicide. So I actually swallowed a ton of pills. I had a ton of pills. I like everything in my cabinet, basically. I had no idea how to kill myself, but I figured if I took a whole bottle of sleeping pills and pain pills and everything that I had, then maybe I could do it. Because the emotions were just so insanely overwhelming, and the shame and the guilt of how I'd self-violated and self-sabotaged myself to this point of being here. That was almost too much to face, or it was too much to face in that moment. So I woke up to my stomach being pumped. So apparently they told me I flatlined. They told I guess the police found me or somebody found me. I really don't remember. I remember my stomach being pumped. I remember people being really mad at me. And then the next morning I went out and got a puppy, because I figured that if I had a puppy who needed me, I wouldn't try to kill myself again. So that was my suicide prevention plan. And I still have her today. So that's my little pit bull. And then I bought a plane ticket. So I did this all in like rapid succession of, okay, well, I didn't die, so I better figure out how to live well, and I better figure out how to live better. So I got a dog. I bought a plane ticket back to Florida one way, and I literally left everything. I had maybe 2 suitcases. I had lived in this area for 5 years. So I had my own apartment. I had all this stuff. I had a career. I just picked up and left because, again, I knew that it was a moment of clarity. And if I did not get away, that I would 100% get sucked back into the dysfunctional toxic cycle of that. So I ran.
And this is a matter of days. Just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, the
Car
weekend
accident.
of Valentine's Day.
No shit.
Uh-huh.
We met not that long ago, like on Valentine's Day. Holy smokes.
Yeah, it was the anniversary.
You might have actually alluded to that in that conversation, if I remember correctly.
The picture pops up, on Thanks Facebook of my truck being totaled. And I'm just like, it's a cool moment, because I'm like, thank you, God, for having that woman almost kill me, because that's what it took, was a Canadian in a Cadillac T-boning me in my truck, and some brain trauma to knock some sense into me.
So you said you bought a ticket back to Florida. So back where this was your parents were?
Yep, that's where I currently live as well.
Yeah. And then your healing journey from that begins.
Yeah. So still not aware that I was being sex trafficked. Now I'm like, okay, I was in an abusive relationship. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. And I knew I had a lot of concussions, just stacked one on top of another, plus the traumatic brain injury. So I just started researching on the internet, everything to do with that, like what that looks like. And for some reason, I found Andy Frisella's podcast, MFCEO, and I was listening to Ed Milet, and those were basically the 2 pieces of information I could handle at that point in my life. And they were having a lot of athletes on. They were talking about inner healing. They were talking about PTSD and healing that. So it was exactly what I needed at that time. And then I thought I was good and healed and ready to take on the world after a couple months. And I started applying to work for nonprofits because I wanted to help women who were being abused. Domestic violence was still in my head. And I ended up applying for an anti-sex trafficking organization. And they hired me for some reason. And I became their intake counselor. So I was literally interviewing women and reading their stories to see if they qualified as a sex trafficking victim to come into our safe housing program. So I'm sitting there reading story after story after story. I'm like, this sounds really familiar. Wow. And after, there was like a woman who had almost identical story to me. And I was like, oh my God, like I was sex and labor trafficked, like textbook definition. And I went to my manager and I'm like, hey, I gotta tell you something. This happened like 6 months ago. And like, I don't know what to do. And so they actually like, holy cow, yep, you were sex and labor trafficked. And they had me get therapy from the same therapist that worked with women that we were rescuing. So I got one of the best PTSD trauma resolution therapists in the country as my therapist. So that was a total gift. I would have never been able to afford or even figure that out. And they supported me through that healing journey.
Wow. It was interesting to hear like okay, I checked the box on the physical, I'm okay. Okay, I'll go back to work. I'll go do something. Like, and obviously, clearly you were guided towards something,
Yeah.
and were inspired to go towards something that was more like giving back, and had around what you had just came from, without necessarily knowing the overarching, like, wait, what's the bigger picture here? The reason why I bring that up is, and I think this would be beneficial for anybody listening, is that I took this from a moment of clarity I had when I was in a meditation group, and there was never like any asking why. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why? Da, 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 da. It's like, he's like, because you're not going to know. You got to kind of just do the thing for a bit.
Mm.
You'll understand why when you get into it. And it wasn't like, it was just kind of, we just showed up, we did the thing. And that's kind of what I took out from what you just said there, is like, you had to just go do that. And then enough repetitions in, you're like, huh, I understand that story.
Yeah.
Wait, I know that story too. Because it's this interesting reflection within ourselves. We're being repeatedly given a mirror of what we've gone through, which I think, when approached from that perspective, when we start talking about healing, I think a lot about things and like balancing this the habits and the mindset. There's something, there's a bridge in between. There is that stuff, and I just think about coaching in general. But the habits, like that masculine, like, just do the thing.
Yeah.
You'll understand the mindset, but then you also have to talk about the mindset too. And then you put it back into the habit, but the habit then it's the same thing, but completely different at the same time.
Sure.
So that was kind of this thing that was happening in the background of my head as you were sharing that piece of like, oh, like this habit of read the story, do the intake, do the thing that you can do. And then one moment you go, oh, I really get it. And then the next level of your healing of just show up to the therapist and like, oh, well, now I really understand this is what's happening. And this is where I need to go with it.
Yeah.
Just to interject that thought, I thought.
Well, and that's where like habits become rituals, right? Because instead of just interviewing women, now I'm proactively redeeming my own past. And I'm proactively taking back what was stolen from me by helping other women. And so it becomes more than just a habit, because now I have intention behind it. And so it becomes a ritual at that point.
Yeah.
And just like meditation, it starts off as a habit that most of us begrudgingly do. But then when we get it, when that enlightenment comes, when that click, that shift happens, and there's, oh, I get it now, and that intention is placed behind it, it becomes a deep, impactful ritual that we build our lives on. And it becomes so much more powerful then.
And just the thing.
It becomes transformational.
It is. It does. Speaking of transformational, so you're going through your internal healing journey. You're now confronting all of this stuff. And so this is your social work period you're mentioning, right? Okay. So all of that, like, I'm assuming you climbed the ladder in some sense of like, okay, I started with the intake to this next phase to this next phase. And you had already alluded to, like, I couldn't be part of this because blood on my hands. And like, it just was not, it sounded like you were just banging your head against the door, or really even like a concrete wall, into like, this is not moving. We don't need another concussion. Like, maybe I got to go contribute a different way.
Yeah.
How do we get from there to where you're at now?
So I worked for that organization for about 7 years. And I worked every single area, and I definitely climbed my way up to where I was like the right-hand person of the CEO running the entire organization, writing legislation. We were counseling New Zealand government. And then I had a falling out with the CEO because I didn't agree with the way the funds that I was raising was being spent. So I started working for foster care with children, so completely different nonprofit, a government funded nonprofit. And I found even more politics and even more atrocious things being done in the name of bonuses and money that was hurting children. So I realized that I could not make the change I wanted to make inside the system, working in the system, that had to be done outside the system with ridiculous amounts of money. And so I quit and started a content agency. And we are growing. And one of our secret missions is to raise and become so insanely successful that I have influential type of money to where I can buy detox beds, I can fund them, I can donate money towards different issues where I know the gaps are because I've worked and seen where the gaps are, and support these survivors and support recovery, because a sex trafficking organization can't function if there's no detox beds, because most of these women need detox. But most of these women aren't high priority for detox because not all of them are IV users. So it's really difficult to get a woman into a bed unless she's an IV drug user, which you have a very small window at that point because they overdose so quickly. So I actually had girls slitting their wrists and injecting drugs because they knew they wouldn't get into a detox unless they were suicide watch or IV drugs. So they would be like snorting cocaine or smoking crack, and they switched to IV drugs, which is far more dangerous and deadlier, in order to get into detox and get the help they needed. So it's those kind of things that need to be fixed, and that I want to fix. And then foster care, don't even get me started for how broken that system is. I know there's a lot of great people in there doing a lot of good work, but you shouldn't have to fight a system in order to save a child's life.
Amen to that.
So I aim to change all that. So.
The world of illumination. In my own opinion, I've read quite a bit of your stuff past couple of weeks since we've talked. I love the way you write. You do capture the voice very well.
Thanks.
And writing and communication is kind of a personal opinion. It's got to be your flavor. I read cult stuff. You and I've talked about spirituality and all the things. I mean, we went on a ride for a first conversation. I didn't know where the hell that thing was going. I never go where any of my conversations are going, but another reason why I value, not everybody can hang with that kind of conversation. A lot of people get scared when we start broaching topics where there is a lot of gray area. There's a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of, what is your opinion? I have no clue. And especially dealing with something that can be as painful as seeing hey, there's a lot of people hurting. And I don't have the ability to help them based off of XYZ reasons in the way. I don't even know where I'm going with it, but just I guess the communication, the written word, and you had mentioned earlier about your journal. That was the thing that kind of allowed you to connect along that entire path. To me, that's because that was one of the first things you brought up in your story was, well, the only way I was really quote unquote talking about this was, well, my journal that I hid under my bed. I hid me under the bed. I stowed it away, and I only brought it up when it was safekeeping,
Let's see
whatever.
if I can see it. Where is it? Oh gosh. It's buried. I can see it, but it's buried. I'll probably topple the whole thing, but it's a little fuzzy, white and black checkered, and then it's got purple daisies on it. That's my very first journal, and I think I was probably 6 or 7. It was I was molested when I was 7 by a neighbor, so I remember writing about that, and it was right before that.
That was the first time you wrote? Oh, you
right
said right before
that.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it's probably around 6.
Wow.
And that was the only way I had to process my thoughts, because I obviously had no training around therapy as a child or even as a young adult. And so the only way for me to survive at that point was writing that, because when you bottle all that stuff up, it just eats you alive. And I constantly, throughout all the years, am writing about my suicidal ideation, my depression, how I feel insane all the time, how I feel manic. I mean, these are words I have now that I didn't have then, but I was I think I'm crazy. I think I have multiple personalities. What is wrong with me? Which I think the majority of teenagers go through that feeling, all the hormones and life changes, but it was so much darker And I just remember complete rage was the dominating emotion. That's my earliest memory I have, is just rage. And that's probably the dominating emotion I have throughout my childhood and adolescence. But rage is just a very concentrated fear. So I was very afraid. And I don't know what. I don't know where that originated from, but fear was definitely the ruling factor the majority of my life. So learning to connect with love and to step into the feminine is, again, super difficult for me, but absolutely important to having a fulfilled life. Because it's super easy for me to act out of that rage or out of that masculine. I'm very aggressive, and that's okay that I tend to be more like that, but understanding how to rest and understanding how to be quiet and understanding how to be still. Those are newer concepts to me that I'm still practicing. Like, meditation's hell for me. Gives me so much anxiety. The first 5 minutes is filled of just sweat, anxiety, don't want to be there. But if I can make it past those first 5 minutes, then it's amazing.
There's that threshold.
You
mentioned
with
that
anything too. There's always that threshold.
Yeah, it's kind of like people talk about the runner's high, that kind of idea.
I've never experienced that. Fuck that. That does not exist.
I've
They're a bunch of liars.
I've had it like once or twice, maybe, but I don't have the strong yearning desire to be out running for.
Nope.
I like a decent run. Like, I'll go 4 or 5 miles. I can do that at most. I rediscovered my love of exercise a couple of years ago. Hence part of the journey back with Naked Sunday. But you brought up rage as being this dominant emotion for a long time. You've been softening it a bit. So just out of curiosity, what dominating emotion do you find now in your life at this new place?
A less intense version of rage. I mean, it's always, I had to relearn how to trust myself, because none of my emotions were real. They're all based off of an ideologies and truths that weren't true. So learning how to undo all of that and then build trust in my intuition, trust in my gut, and trying to figure out, okay, is this a reaction to some dysfunction, or is this a real genuine intuition thing? That's really hard to figure out after you've been through trauma, because your gut reaction is always super negative. It's always fight or flight. And so it took years and years and years for me to try to separate those and understand how they just feel slightly different. And that's what makes mental health, I think, so subtle. And why a lot of people might label me as toxic, kind of like alpha female toxic kind of person in that kind of way. Because like, even my last post, I posted something about how, like, hey, A-type driven people, quit fucking around. It's so easy to win at this point. Quit being lazy. I want you to give your best. I got so many anti-hustle culture comments and DMs in my inbox about that. And I'm like, I did not say you have to work 14-hour days. I said, give your best. And if your best looks like you meditating for 14 fucking hours, then do it. Whatever your best is. It was just interesting that people interpreted it that way. So all that to say, I'm working really hard to figure out what parts of my obsessions to embrace and what are driven by fear. I think it's the intention that really, really matters there. So if I'm working aggressively and hustling my ass off because I'm afraid of not making enough money, or afraid of not being successful, or it's tied to my self-worth, that's dysfunctional. That needs to stop. If I'm doing it because I love the game, I love making money, I'm alive, I'm just having so much fun, cool. Okay, then you're good. And like that, no matter how that looks on the outside, what's going on the inside is the most important thing. So learning to test my intentions is where I'm at right now. And I know I have days to where I'm like, you got to stop, you're being crazy. And then I have other days to where I'm like, no, I'm 14 hours in, I'm on a roll. It's 9 o'clock at night and I'm so alive right now. So I've had to learn to stop apologizing for being a hustler and for loving the game of business and making money and I fucking love it. And I'm not sorry about it. And if you can't keep up, that's not my problem. And you don't get to judge me because you can't keep up.
Well, you're also being driven by something very different.
Yeah.
Like you already told us the subcontext. Like
yeah.
the not so secret that you shared before of like, oh,
yeah.
well, because you had said like, if I go to sleep tonight, this kid is going to get raped. Oh, so your hustle, as now I'm hearing it, is, well, I'm building this other thing to be able to help that. So there is an intensity to that. And that's, I think people can, you brought it out. It's like the same thing could actually be two very different things at the same time. But until you ask somebody what's driving that, you're not going to understand the undercurrent. You're not going to appreciate, oh, well, that's why she's up at 12 o'clock doing that. Like, oh, I get it. Of course, learning how to like find that flow state and all those things, that's a journey in and of itself. I think we're all on that journey in general. That's a thing you never figure it out. It's like, okay, I learned something new. Like, all right, now how do I deal with that new information? Like, here we go.
But I just think it's super trendy to tell people to sabotage their flow state because it doesn't, oh, you're working after 5, you don't have boundaries. Shut the fuck up. Like, just because that's your boundary doesn't mean that that's my boundary. Like, so I just, that like drives me insane when you've got the health gurus, hashtag life coach telling you that you only can work 9 to 5 and can't work weekends. Who the fuck made you the boss? Why are you setting rules for this? It's like, I know what's healthy for me, and I know to never interrupt that flow because it's too precious and too important and it's divine. And like, I will not interrupt my flow when I'm in it because it's just too holy of a moment.
Well, I think that brings up something else there, especially when a lot of people get into the coaching field. I think at every point in somebody's life, people try to flip over to that. Like, I got some success in one thing, I want to now teach another.
Sure.
I had a coach of mine. She said something very profound to me. When you're ready to learn, start to teach. Very different than those who can't teach. Maybe there's shades of that as well, but like, I thought this was very different. And what I think what you're alluding to is the new coach. It's the irony of like, I want to save the world, but leading with a savior complex, which is still playing the victim somewhere else in your heart. To change that, because you used a very powerful, people tell you not to work beyond this. It's like, as opposed to, hey, let me understand you. How do you work best? And holding space for that. The difference then becomes, hey, you told me you work best from 9 to 5. Are you abiding by those things that you told me was best for you? That's a very different conversation. Same thing, same end result. Maybe you still might be 9 to 5, but how you get there doesn't put that same friction. There's a lot of, it's ironically one flow creating another flow, and like embodying, and like it becomes a constant flow state, which is, that's its own thing. Maybe we should record that and write some content around that. You'd be like, that might be my next post. But I think that's the irony of a lot of things. Like, when you've become the victim in one place, you start to become the perpetrator in another, but not even realizing what you're doing. Because
and people, for whatever reason, we think our lives are as compartmentalized in real life as they are in our minds, and that's just not true. You're going to be who you're going to be, in every single area of your life, whether you want to or not. You impart who you are. You can say and do whatever the fuck you think you are. You can put on whatever act, whatever mask, but you impart who you are. So if you're bitter towards a certain race, that's going to show up in every aspect of your life, no matter how hard you try to hide it. Just for example, and I mean, we saw that a ton in social work. Social work attracts highly dysfunctional people to work as a social worker and really incredible and healthy people. No in between, like one or the other. So it's always really interesting because those highly dysfunctional people gave up on fixing themselves, and it feels really good. It's a lot easier to fix other people instead of actually doing the dark inner healing work. Like inner healing isn't some like perfectly toned stomach in yoga pants and a cute sports bra, drinking some skinny tea and umming. Like that's not inner work. Inner work is mascara, snot, tears, sweat, anger, ugly stuff coming in and coming out of you. And people just aren't willing to do that work. And so it's a lot easier for me to become a life coach and try to fix you than to actually fix me. And it was kind of funny because on that same post, I had someone comment that she said, oh, I traded my hustle stilettos for like self-love sneakers or something like that. I'm like, oh. And I'm like, well, my ass looks way better in stilettos. So like, I don't know what to tell you. I like my stilettos. My ass looks great. So I'm like, I don't know why you're trying to like turn this into an either or. Like, I wear stilettos when I need to wear stilettos. I wear sneakers when I need to wear sneakers. I'm not wearing any shoes right now. Like, why are we, again, that gray area? Like, I don't know why we pretend it doesn't exist, but it absolutely does. A lot more gray than black and white, for sure.
This is about the most naked Sunday conversation ever.
Really?
Well, you brought this.
I'm like, I'm wearing a sweater. I wonder if I should like change into a tank top or something for naked Sunday talk.
The first, to that effect, the first like 10 episodes, I started the show with my friend. Speaking of forgiveness, it was a whole process of us kind of illuminating us rebuilding our friendship. And
wow.
Yeah. And we made a joke while it was like, I think it was like expectations. Like, I know I could expect Caleb to show up to every one of these episodes with his shirt off or whatever. And it looked like I was butt ass naked just from the chest up. So I get a lot of times people like, am I supposed to be physically naked on this thing? You want to be?
I thought it for a split second. And I'm like, nah. I mean, I could wear a tube top and we could pull it off, but I don't know if that sends the right message, especially talking about like sex trafficking. And then,
right. Like, and I think that's, I mean, don't get me wrong. I know what naked Sunday, I know it turns somebody's head when they hear like, what? Like, especially if I'm like at some professional networking meeting, and they're what? And I'm like, cool, let's have a real time. Let's have a real conversation about this. Like being naked, for me, and this is alluding to kind of some of the healing process you're talking about, like, stripping down to nothing while it was a physical act, what that then forced me to do was confront the person in the mirror. Had to look at the darkness, had to see the physical things I was uncomfortable with, but also it brought up the voices at the same time. Of course, sharing that space with my wife as we're building a relationship and us both being honest in that space. It is this healing. It can be, first, it must come from within. And then you can bring in other parties, but and both parties have to be going on that journey. It's like, it's not like I'm just doing this, I'm going to drag you along begging and screaming and whatever. Like that's not it's what we talked about there. Like the hurt people just trying to save other people at the same, like that's savior complex. That's not helping anybody. It's actually making it worse. Like you're then saying like, you need somebody else to save you. Nope. Like that's not the way this whole thing plays out. You're just creating more dysfunctionality and more dependencies and more issues. I don't even know what's going with my train of thought on that, but I think I had already alluded to, like, I might go for a ride on some thoughts, and you can go for some ride on some thoughts too. Like, it's cool. But what you're saying, like, yeah, like if we're talking about sex trafficking, like it's more about, can we be real and be vulnerable? Can we be ourselves? And you had mentioned that before. If underneath all of that, there's some darkness,
Mhm.
Does not matter how much you shine the exterior, the undercurrent is still going to show up. Even if it bends at 5, 1, 2%,
Yeah.
it's still going to affect in some way, shape, or form the outcomes of the situations you're going to show up for.
Right.
And you do that at volume, that's a big deal. That's a
Yeah.
big deal. It might not feel like a big deal if you do it just once, but if it's every day you're showing up with that energy, that's what wears people down. That's what gets disdain. That's what gets anger. That's where it is. And you sometimes just don't even know until like it's too late. So
Mhm.
that was the end of that thought train. Unless there's
Well,
something else in there.
learning to embrace your darkness, like while you're in process. Like
Mm,
I still have dark areas. I'm still struggle with manic depression. I'm bipolar. I still have PTSD. Um, Suicidal ideation is a normal part of my life.
mm,
It just is. And that freaks a lot of people out. I'm so used to that little person living inside me saying this really random stuff to me, and that I've learned to just kind of embrace it until we can finish our healing. I think a lot of people try to like stuff these things in closets inside themselves until the whole process is done.
mm,
But it's a lifetime of that process, right? Like it takes, like life still happens and still triggers and still brings up things.
mm,
So you can think you're all healed and then somebody dies or something horrible happens and all those things come busting out of the cabinets again that you thought were resolved.
mm,
So learning how to negotiate, embrace, and kind of just like love on your dark areas while you're in process, I feel like is really important to survival, especially, if you're dealing with some really dark shit, which I've dealt with and am dealing with. I just know I'm going to have a breakdown every Thursday. I schedule it.
mm,
And is it a mental breakdown every single time? No. But it's a space that I've carved out in my weekly schedule that by the time I get to Thursday, I'm pretty running low.
mm,
And my emotions might be fried at that point, or I might be fine. But either way, I create a space for my emotions to come out however they need to come out in order for me to process it and be okay and move on,
mm,
so that I can be effective and productive during my week because I
mm,
know I have that time on Thursday. So it might not be the healthiest way of dealing with shit, but I basically just say, okay, I get that I feel this way. I get that I'm being triggered right here or that I'm really depressed. We're going to deal with you on Thursday. You have an appointment on Thursday. We're going to talk and meet on Thursday.
mm.
And then I talk and meet with my depression, my suicidal ideation, my miscarriages, in that time, feel it, stay engaged in that uncomfortable feeling, process it, and just every time it gets less and less and easier. But I think it's important to have those times and periods and to not just ignore the dark areas, but embrace them. Like me embracing the fact that I'm aggressive, that I'm
Mm.
alpha, that I tend to be more masculine. Like I've hid that for so long and been ashamed of that and been shamed about it. I'm so over it. I'm so over it. And when I utilize those monsters, when I leverage them and release them at the right times, that's power. I get like when I understand how to release that hustler, that manic person, that aggressive competitive person released at the right time, she's an animal and she can close deals and she can get shit done and it's amazing. Do I live in that area? No, but I understand how to leverage my dark areas and that's been fun. It's a fun process.
There's two things that came up for me there. One was the mechanical, like scheduling an appointment. And you brought it up, like, I don't even think you needed to really go there. It's like, it might not be the healthiest way. Like, that's a
Mm,
signing almost like, but I think what's a different way of saying is like, this is the first step I took on that. This is
mhm.
how it's working so far. At a minimum, I have a stopgap to
Yeah.
check in. I think that's important. Like, again, there's the mechanical tradition, like it's even a mechanical process, like to house that
Mhm.
feminine processing of the emotional. And then the second piece you brought up, there's a reflection. I've heard Jordan Peterson bring it up, but I can't remember the I think it was like a Chinese philosopher or something like that who brought it up. It's like it's better to be a warrior in the garden, the gardener in the war.
Mhm.
And it's about this idea of what you said, knowing how to bring out that piece, how to dose it appropriately to say like, bam, like, and you can be ferocious when you need to, and you can close the deals, whatever it needs to be. It can be aggressive or assertive, would maybe be a better word for it, because you know how to control it. But it
Yeah.
came from first knowing how to grapple with the darkness in a
Mhm.
space beforehand. But
Mhm.
people don't think about that. And you do need, people think it's like, we just talked about this is binary. It's knowing how to use both the things. You need both the masculine and the feminine
Yeah.
to be whole. We're not either or,
Mhm.
not in a relationship with a significant other, and not even within ourselves.
Mhm.
See that on my logo, it's like pink and blue. It's kind of like, there it is, like those two things. There's going to be this tipping point, and which, and sometimes one's going to be more heavy or another, but like knowing how to hand them back and forth and make it so that, like you said, you have your process on Thursdays, you have your thing, you sit with that. Cool. That's your way to process
Mhm.
and like make sure the other side of you still like recovers and heals and regenerates and whatever it is. That's what I heard under all that. And I think it's, what I think is also just as important is if it's contextually appropriate to you.
Mhm.
Same thing you said before. People say you got to just do your 9 to 5 or whatever, however, optimal morning or
Yeah.
says who? Like some people are night animals. Like that's just how they work. I got plenty of friends. They like being up at night. Okay, do you, man? Like, so what if you put in 8 hours of work at the crack of dawn or the end of the day? Like, does it really matter if the work got done? I don't know. Like, no, it doesn't. Like it's the end result. And I think there's such dogma about, well, that one person did it that way, so I mean it must be the right way. No, it just was the way that worked for them. And there might be a bunch of other people that also works for that way. But what's that small fine tuning that's going to work just right for you? That's a journey. That's not going to be solved overnight. And it's sure as hell can't be dogmatic from somebody else. It has to be like driven from within.
Well, I think people don't know themselves,
No.
especially entrepreneurs, because those young entrepreneurs, they're always looking for a coach. They always need a coach. They always need a blueprint. They always need a course. And like I got caught up in that because, like, damn, being an entrepreneur and running your own business is like the biggest personal development journey you will ever be on. And it is not what I expect. I'm like, I'm going to start a business. It's going to be great. It's like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, this is the worst.
Yeah.
But it's way more emotional, and the stress levels and the highs and the lows. It is a roller coaster. And I think a lot of people fail in business, not because they're bad at business, but because they don't know who the hell they are. And they're not mentally strong. They're not emotionally intelligent. It actually has nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with the person. And your business will only grow to the level that you grow to as an individual. And I think people get stuck because they don't make that fucking connection, and they just go, oh, my business failed. Your business didn't fail. It wasn't going to fail. You just didn't do the inner work to grow your business, to grow yourself, to grow everything. And I don't know, again, I don't know why people compartmentalize their lives and think that that's the way it works. It does not work that way. You will infect everything you touch, either for good or for bad. And it all depends on your inner work.
It's so funny you had said that about entrepreneurship. Listen, me stumbling over my words. Entrepreneurism. I had somebody else say it was like it's a mask for personal development. It's a euphemism. Pardon, it's a euphemism for personal development. It's our reason.
Trap.
It's a trap.
Run. It's a fucking trap. We all got conned into massive personal development journeys when we thought we were just going to make money and fly on jets. They tricked us. Whoever they are.
Whoever they are, yeah, in quotes. I think, but it's like the same thing. It's this interesting thing. A lot of people get attracted. You've probably heard the thing like sell them what they want, give them what they need. People see the, whether it's the houses and the jets and all that stuff, or it's the, I'm at a place in my life where I look at the entrepreneur who's like, No, you just spent time home with your family, like on a Wednesday night, and you were just chill. Like that is my idea personally of like, no, I'm just home, snuggling with my wife and my dog on the couch, and then hopefully one day with children. Like that's my American dream. That's the Caleb Nelson thing. Like I don't like those like the jets and the cars and all that stuff. Like that's like a fleeting thought for a moment, but like when the weight of trying to carry all that stuff fades away, I was like, what do I really care about? It's those things. Point I'm trying to bring it back to is we're sold on that idea, but what you have to do, as you're alluding to, is on that journey to that, it means you're going to have to confront the person within you. What is the real reason why you're not allowing yourself to be successful in that light of the external thing? Like, what is that person representing? Probably the reason why entrepreneurs in general, there's like, I need a coach. Well, it's maybe you're needing an example, or you're needing to have the questions, or you're wanting those things. But if we allow ourselves a space to just sit within ourselves and just go, what do I think about this? And then just learn how to just trust the damn thing. I don't know. Where do we end up
find
then?
all the answers.
You'll find all the answers. But oh my God, I knew what to do. I knew what to do all along, damn it.
We do. And learning to trust that gut and that intuition, that's what all these successful people were able to do. They were able to figure themselves out. If you talk to these people, they're not dumb people. They're emotionally intelligent, highly aware individuals. No matter how they present, if they present as toxic or they present as whatever, they're still very aware of what they are. They've embraced it. They've learned to control it and to leverage it. And that's why they're successful. It comes all down to knowing yourself, period, and spending time with yourself. That's where all success lead. What all things lead to success is that. You know what I'm trying to say.
Well, perhaps the bigger question I think people eventually come to, and I certainly have spent probably the past couple of years really allowing for this, is giving yourself permission to sit with yourself. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are waiting for that. And it's not sitting and doing nothing. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be more prudent to say it's sitting and observing. Mm-hmm. And you can't really observe things until you let the emotional clouds settle for a second, and then just, oh, so that's what it is. Sure. Okay, cool. Let me unwind that. Let me play with it for a second. And then, you got to go apply it a little bit. Then you come back and be like, well, what did I learn? That's not an easy path. So I really enjoy your perspective on that.
I used to, when I first started my business, like my business got crazy successful in a short amount of time. I'm super grateful for that. And in the first year, I attributed that to anytime I'd get a tattoo, I would get a new client, a new big client. And so people would ask me, what's your business plan? I'm like, tattoos and going to therapy. Those are my two. Anytime I go to therapy, I get a client. Anytime I get a new tattoo, because those were the times I was sitting quiet, receiving. And when I'm getting tattoos, I'm deep breathing because it's painful. And so I'm sitting there deep breathing, trying to think about anything other than the pain. So I'm processing all these other things. And I told my tattoo artist, I'm like, damn, man, every single time I get a tattoo from you, I get a new big client. But it's that self-investment. I was investing in myself in a way that made me feel confident and valuable. And I was setting a time aside to do breath work and meditation without even realizing what I'm doing. And it directly affected my business. Now I got a full sleeve. So now I got to get a sleeve on this side. I'm excited for all the business my tattoos will bring me this year.
You crack me up. I love
exactly what you're saying. It's no different. It's the same exact thing. It's just my version of it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I love about not only just your writing, but just like people's writing and storytelling. You're telling the story, and then that's the external representation. But like, here's that heartfelt transformation along the way. And God, I just enjoy your company. I just don't know why. I felt like I had to share that again. Like, oh my God. Like,
feeling is mutual, sir.
That make me blush. Thank you. See, look at me. I had to work on my own saying thank you too. So, oh gosh,
Good
I got to
job.
hold myself accountable. But feel like I have so much to chew on right now, just from like this conversation.
Mm.
I don't really have many more questions or thoughts today, but to that effect, like, what else do you feel compelled to share? Any other thoughts, feelings, emotions, guidance, advice, wisdom of the ages?
Oh God. No, just if you want to be successful, figure out who the fuck you are and spend time with yourself. That's the key to all success. To relationship success, business success, personal success. I don't know. You gotta like you. If you don't like you, then nobody's gonna like you.
That could have been the podcast right there. That might be the teaser. Who knows? That might be the teaser altogether.
That's all I got.
All you got after like what, we're an hour and a half in right now? Like, that's all I got.
I mean, I could probably keep going, but I'm sure people are sick and tired of hearing from me at this point.
I'm not. I'm just so excited because I feel like we're going to be good friends, and I'm just so grateful. I'm just in this interesting place in my life in general, of where I hope even the fact that we're having this conversation right now can illuminate within other people who are listening that we met 2 weeks ago on the internet. Like, people are willing to have conversations. People are willing to be open and real and honest and just kind and insightful, and to share and to give and to love and to be appreciative and to support. And I say that because I'm surprised how often now I'm running into people that are just very lonely. I see that a lot, and I'm just surprised. I didn't realize it was as big a thing. Obviously, the pandemic did some stuff around that, or did some stuff. It contributed. It might have thrown gasoline on that fire, and it made it far more apparent. But for me, that's the thing. It sticks out. I've already been aware of the fact that most people are afraid to share anything of themselves, like really of themselves. I see it in marriages all the time. It's like, you haven't talked to your wife or your husband about that thing. What? Like, what? And then, fast forward a few years, and then people are surprised why there's divorce. I'm like, because you didn't confront the real stuff, and you just talked about it. Unless you're real with yourself, how are you going to expect success in any avenue, business, relational, health, whatever the thing is? You must go inward. And part of growing a life with somebody, or growing a business with clients or staff or partners, is being honest about who you are and allowing them to be honest about themselves, and then sharing in that journey and saying, like, how do we figure this out together? Anyway, sitting here
100%.
I like just saying that is like, I hope somebody who is feeling lonely right now, like, can go, whoa, this is possible. Like, we're capable of having a conversation about real things, processing stuff, talking about hard things too, and can learn. I mean, I learned, like, I think I stopped 4 times. Like, I had no idea about that today. It's kind of fun. And and being the addict to curiosity, or whatever, the obsessive curiosity, like, cool, I got to learn some more things from you today. Like, how beautiful is that? I don't know, that's just, I know I'm gushing my appreciation today, but you know what? Screw it. I'm happy about that. It makes me feel good too, just appreciating other people.
That's how the world collectively gets better, right?
That's how we continue this. I have it written down, this journey to world illumination.
Yes.
I'm definitely making that the title of this episode. And I think I have a gentle suggestion.
Did you just hear that weird cackle that I just made?
Yeah.
The fuck was that shit?
Oh God.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead. What was your suggestion?
I don't know. I said maybe we lead with that instead of domination. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. We're gonna lead with world illumination.
I don't know why I feel like there's going to be like song and dance breaking out now. I don't know. We're just going to
Let's
get
not
weird.
make this culty. Okay. I've escaped a few cults at this point in my life. I don't have to start one. Hard pass.
Oh my God. I enjoy your company almost too much. Not true. And notice I said almost because it's not possible
Okay.
for it to be too
Okay.
much. Anyway, Amanda, any more thoughts
No,
for all
stop
this?
it. I'm
No,
done.
I got
I'm
nothing
kidding.
else. If somebody has listened to this juncture and they're like, you know what? She gets it. I need more of this human being in my life. And I like, she's clearly good at what she does. And I need support with all the things, the writing, all that stuff, especially an entrepreneur who's like, I want to make sure I highlight my vision, my whatever, get my message out there properly. I'm like, Amanda, you got it. How would somebody best get in touch with you?
Instagram. I'm on the gram all the time. So I'm Amanda Catarzi on Instagram. Like, please slide into my DMs. I'm all about it. I like live in my Instagram DMs.
You just make my day. Just the
It's
way you are. You just make my day.
That's actually the call to action on my website is slide into my DMs. And then I do have websites like a normal functional human being. So inkeryco.com and amidacatarzi.com is my new one.
You're amazing. For the record, everybody, all the contact information is going to be in the show notes. So you can slide into the DM or however you'll have the access, the information to slide into the DMs ethically and responsibly.
Of course.
Amanda, I'm just super, super grateful to have met you, but 7 to 10 days ago. I'm so grateful for this conversation today. I am inspired by your vision to support those in need. And I think what you're doing is really powerful and really fantastic. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your story and being vulnerable and being real and being kind. It just means the world to me.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
You're amazing. It was my pleasure. Again, everybody who's listening, I'll put Amanda's contact information in the show notes. Check that out. And until next time, remember to love everybody.